On September 1st, 1939, Germany declared war on Poland, essentially starting World War II. In response to this, France and Great Britain declared war on Germany. To take over much of Western Europe, including England, Germany used quick strikes known as blitzkrieg, dropping bombs in England. In fear of the dangerous airstrikes from Germany, Britain began the evacuation of children from their cities. This later became Operation Pied Piper. Although originally established by the government, people also took the operation privately to ensure evacuation. The bombings and the evacuation of children greatly changed people's lives.
Life in England during World War II was very serious. In order to avoid bombings, the government implemented blackout policies. These policies would include things such as curfews and blackout curtains. The main idea was to prevent bombers from seeing the light in the city and dropping the bombs. This was taken so seriously that if you did not obey the laws, you could be arrested or fined by government-appointed blackout officers.
This is Gloria Hurst, a World War II evacuee, retelling her story.
Well, I was quite small, but I do remember the blackout. Everywhere was very dark. There were searchlights in the sky at night that used to pick out the planes coming over. There were things called barrage balloons, which were great big silver things, and we used to have white tape all across the windows, because if a bomb came down and blew out the windows, it saved the glass from flying everywhere.
Over 1.9 million children gathered at railroad stations in early September in 1939. They did not know where they were going and didn't know if they would be split from their siblings. In London, there were over 1,500 assembly points for children to gather before being placed in their new homes. Children who were evacuated were given a stamped postcard to send home so their parents knew where they were. In this process, a town outside the bombing zone, Ainsley, expected 625 children to arrive, but over 2,400 did. In North Wales, they didn't expect any evacuees from England, but 400 showed up. This shows the desperation for the kids' safety. Children in these places were stressed from their journey, and now since there weren't enough host families, they had no place to go. In the mix of cultures, many of the kids were seen as aliens. When they arrived, people looked through their hair and opened their mouths to check for disease or other abnormalities. They were viewed as more animals than children. Some were sent to stay with relatives in other countries, others with complete strangers. Children had labels attached to them as if they were packages. Upon arrival, they were taken to the village hall where they met the billeting officer, who was in charge of finding them a home. After this, a pick-your-own evacuee session would take place, and host families took the most presentable children, leaving the sick and grubbier children to find a home last.
I don't actually remember leaving London, but I must have left on the train, because most of us travelled that way because there were not many cars. We weren't rich enough for cars, and I would have had my gas mask with me that I always had to carry.
Life as an evacuee in foster homes was different for every child. Some children were extremely fortunate and ended up with loving, caring, and supportive families. These evacuees are still thankful for their foster parents and for the way they treated them like their own children. The exceptional foster parents educated and went above and beyond in caring for their foster child. Some kids loved their families so much that they didn't even want to return home after the war had ended. When children did return home, that wasn't the end of their relationship with their foster parents. Children often continued to keep in touch and go back and visit these people who had become family. And in rare cases, children even went back to support the family when a foster parent had passed away several years later. Some evacuees were not so fortunate and did not end up in loving homes. Many kids were separated from their siblings. Others had abusive parents or ones who did not care about the kids and did not want them. Many children were not given an education or opportunity to interact with many other children. Many kids had poor nutrition, and the foster parents were not mindful of what they were feeding their children. This left many kids thin and malnourished. If kids were educated, oftentimes too many kids were placed in one room since teachers were trying to save time and there was not enough money to educate all. But these kids did not mind these crowded conditions since it got them away from their unfit foster families. Although some evacuees had an enjoyable experience in their foster homes, many children suffered.
Well, I have to say, not very nice. I was billeted with a very old lady who didn't seem to want me, and she also had soldiers living in the house, another part of the house. Not that I saw them really very much at all. And my only friend really was the dog, that she had a little dog, and I loved him. But she wasn't kind to me, and I don't have happy memories at all of being billeted during the war, being an evacuee. Well, my memory of the food is nothing very nice at all. Certainly not very much to eat, because I know when I came home I was very thin, but if I didn't eat what was put in front of me, it would be produced at the next meal time, and I'd have to try and eat it then. And so there must have been many battles at the table, because it was just horrible to have to eat, for example, custard that had gone cold, and she just would stand over me and make me eat it. And I didn't have a lot to eat. None of us did.
Returning home after the war was very difficult for children. When being reunited with their real parents, many children found it hard to adjust back to their way of life. This led to children finding it hard to love their parents again, and many children missed their host families. However, children who did not have an enjoyable experience faced an entirely new set of problems. Although they were happy to be reunited with their parents, their experience of living with their abusive foster families forced kids to deal with psychological and physical problems for the rest of their lives. Kids never knew what to expect when coming home. Some kids did not know where they lived. Many children came home to destroyed houses. Others even came back to see their parents had died while they were away. Kids could not immediately return to a comfortable way of life when they returned home. The economy was still recovering from the war, causing their daily life to be very different. Oftentimes, children no longer recognized their friends and family they once saw every day. Returning home after the war was like starting over for a second time.
Well, that was really quite interesting, because whilst I was evacuated, my mummy died, and previously my daddy had died, so it meant that I had no brothers and sisters, and so a family who my mother had asked if they would look after me came to collect me and took me back to London with them, and subsequently they formally adopted me.
Although Operation Pied Piper occurred 60 years ago, and mostly in England, it still continues to affect the whole world today. Movies like Peter Pan, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and the novel The Lord of the Flies all have storylines based upon children being evacuated from the dangers of World War II in Operation Pied Piper.
Operation Pied Piper was an important event to shape World War II. This operation officially relocated over 3.5 million people to safety. Without this evacuation, England could have lost the majority of these evacuated people. Although Operation Pied Piper may have caused serious problems for these kids, it was ultimately for their well-being. This operation came to a close in 1949 when the urban areas once again became safe for living. 60 years later, and people still remember this tragedy of World War II. However, as Juliet Gardner once said, "The forgotten victims of World War II were the children."